Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Horror Mine. My name is Vic Shy, and this is the Scare Score, where I break down horror movies and rate them on how scary I think they are. In this episode, I'll be going over the 2019 Filipino horror film, CLARITA. I'll be going over the events that take place throughout the film while breaking down the scares and rating them on how scary they are or attempt to be. The film is inspired by the real-life events surrounding the 1953 possession of CLARITA Villanueva, but how scary is it? Sit back and relax and join me as we explore CLARITA and tally up the scare score. Our movie begins with the quote, "For our struggles are not against the flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in these supernatural places." Letter of Paul to the Ephesians. We are introduced to CLARITA Villanueva being escorted to a jail cell on charges of prostitution. We immediately see there is something off about her. She is afraid of demons and doesn't want to be left alone. The other inmates are already annoyed by how loud she is, and she stares at them in a very unsettling way. This was a fairly standard opening scene and a good introduction to the character of CLARITA. CLARITA is being hounded by reporters as her possible demonic possession has gained national media attention. The mayor of Manila, Mayor Arsenio Lacson, isn't happy with the attention the city is getting over this case. Alongside a psychiatrist named Dr. Teresa, Mayor Lacson tells the media that CLARITA is suffering from mental illness and needs medical attention. CLARITA takes that quite literally and bites her own finger off. This is slightly shocking because it comes fast and unexpected, but also plays out a little bit silly. The warden goes to check on her and she completely bends backwards and asks for help. CLARITA is visited by two Catholic priests, Father Salvador and the much younger Father Benedicto. Father Benedicto doesn't believe in demons and thinks everything can be explained using science. During a conversation between them, we see that Benedicto has a scar on the left side of his face. The story behind his scar contributes to his current beliefs. The two priests are fictional characters just for the movie. The person who actually investigated and performed an exorcism on CLARITA was an American pastor named Lester Sumrall. We meet a journalist named Amelia Henson who wants to write an article on CLARITA's possession. Father Salvador believes she has a personal interest in this case and cautions her on her motives. He views this as a dangerous case, one she won't be able to simply back out of. She begins by investigating the mysterious deaths of two doctors who looked after CLARITA. The first is Dr. Navarro, who tended to CLARITA right after Charlie bit her finger. He sedates her and she says he won't live past midnight. This is witnessed by the janitor, who was the one telling Amelia the story. He finds Dr. Navarro dead in his office the next morning. The next victim is Dr. Perez, who was struck by a car. The car's license plate was 2069, numbers that CLARITA repeatedly spoke while menacingly staring at Dr. Perez before her death. These two deaths feel very uneventful and rushed, which takes the tension out of what could have been a good scare scene. Dr. Teresa evaluates CLARITA and admits to Amelia that she is only working with her to progress her career, but you can only advance your career if you're alive. CLARITA ensures that this isn't the case for Dr. Teresa. One predictable jump scare and neck crank later, and Dr. Teresa is found dead with CLARITA still chained to her chair. CLARITA crawling on the ceiling was pretty creepy, but it was very formulaic and cliche. CLARITA's fellow inmate named Bubbles grabs her from behind because she's been staring at her. By the look on CLARITA's face, Bubbles just made the biggest mistake of her life, one more severe than the choices that landed her in jail in the first place. As the other women go shower, CLARITA draws a demonic seal on the wall with her blood. With each stroke, Bubbles is brutalized in the shower, showing that Bubbles the jail bully should have just been CLARITA's bubble buddy. Ugh, these jokes are getting worse with each video. Anything that has to do with nails really gets under my skin, and this scene does exactly that. It's the first scene where we see just how severe and dangerous CLARITA's possession really is. The priests return to the jail and find CLARITA frozen on the ground in a horrifying pose. CLARITA taunts Father Salvador in the stereotypical demonic voice and says that they're just getting started. Father Salvador asks the Archbishop for permission to do the exorcism, but Father Benedicto still still believes her behavior is a result of mental illness. This angers Father Salvador, who says he knows the difference between a sick person and a demon. Father Salvador seems very triggered and grabs his neck out of pain. The Archbishop will approve the exorcism but wants them to get to the root of her possession. The Archbishop feels that Father Salvador is carrying a heavy load on his shoulders, making him easily agitated. Salvador tells Emilia that it may take numerous exorcisms to drive the demons out of Clarita. The priests prepare for the exorcism as the warden ties Clarita to the bed. Father Salvador begins the exorcism, which doesn't appear very effective. The warden tries holding her down, but Clarita overpowers him. Father Salvador proceeds to use the most amount of holy water I've seen a Catholic priest use during an exorcism scene, and he's being real wasteful with it. Possessed Clarita starts playing mind games and begs them to stop hurting her, but don't worry, Father Salvador's got something for that. She then attacks Father Benedicto's faith and the fact that he doesn't believe in demons. She rises out of bed and licks his face before throwing him against the wall. As they try to restrain her, the shadows of the demons possessing her appear on the wall. Notice that the scare score didn't go up a single point during that scene. I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but everything about this scene has been done before and better. I think that there's this misconception that simply having a woman be possessed and saying horrible things in a demonic voice is enough to generate scares. That alone is not enough to be scary, at least not for me, especially when it's been previously done hundreds of times. The priests are shaken after the encounter, but it didn't really appear that way while it was happening. Father Benedicto listens to the tape recording and has a flashback involving his mother, who was allegedly possessed, and hears her voice on the recording. He opens up to Father Salvador and reveals why he doesn't believe in demons. His mother was thought to be possessed and an exorcism was performed on her. He believes if she had been admitted to a hospital instead, she would still be alive. They question Clarita to get more information about her, and we learn she is 26 years old, whereas the real-life Clarita was 17 during the time of her possession. Her late mother was a spiritual healer, and she never knew her father. Clarita turns around, and Father Salvador's face appears demonic to her. Father Benedicto and Emilia's faces look the same way, which made the entire thing look pretty silly, though we do get a good jump scare that caught me off guard. While praying in church, a demonic voice can be heard mocking Father Salvador from behind. He finishes his prayers and more voices can be heard. The demon's shadow then appears on the wall and a candle goes out. This was a very decent scare scene with the creepiest atmosphere in the film so far. My only problem with it is it just gets cut off after the demon's shadow appears. We don't get any sort of reaction from Father Salvador, and he is completely fine in the next scene. This really downplays the entire scene that could have been a lot scarier. Emilia visits her sister named Conching, who is in a wheelchair and doesn't speak. Emilia develops some photos, and I thought we were in for a great scare, but what we get is a cheap jump scare that doesn't really utilize the creepy darkroom setting. She has a brief nightmare involving her sister and Japanese soldiers running in a dark forest. Clarita's possession takes place in 1953, just a few years post the Japanese occupation of the Philippines during World War II. Emilia and Father Benedicto decide to visit Clarita's hometown to learn more about her past. They speak to some locals that say that she and her mother lived in a nearby cave. They were told to get out of town as the town does not accept people who have evil relations. As they walk toward the cave, Emilia hears the sound of a woman crying. They find the cave relatively easily and see several devilish symbols on the wall. Benedicto hears his mother's cry for help and they run out of the cave. And that's it. That is the entire scene of them doing research on Clarita's backstory. It literally takes 2 minutes from when they arrive at Clarita's hometown until they leave the cave. This scene felt pretty pointless narratively and didn't offer any scares. We're more than halfway into the film now, and this is when I knew it wasn't going to get much better. Father Salvador holds mass and speaks about battling the forces of darkness. While holding up a chalice, he sees the demon in its reflection. He starts sweating bullets and the demon reappears directly behind him. This was an actually good scare scene with an effective scare device. Seeing the demon in the chalice's reflection in broad daylight is not something I was expecting. The way the demon moves is also pretty unsettling. Again, I just wish the encounter was more consequential. The film literally cuts to the next scene, and again, Father Salvador appears just fine. They report the information they obtained off screen to Father Salvador in the form of an exposition dump flashback. Clarita was born out of wedlock and her mother was a spiritual healer. The people of the town would come to her mother for help, but also blame their misfortune on her mother. Clarita and her mom were driven out of the town and into the cave. Clarita then moved into an apartment in Manila and went looking for her father every day. No ma'am, I didn't. Wait. She wasn't asking me, was she? She searched for her father for months, all while being tormented by the demons that followed her. We get a predictable jump scare as a hand grabs her foot from under the bed. She hears crying coming from the closet and sees her demonic self inside. This flashback was a decent scare scene that really makes you feel bad for Clarita. The scene really shows how difficult her life has been. Clarita says that every time she is left alone, the demons do things to her that are no words here on YouTube. Clarita has been seeing demons since she was a child, something she thought was normal considering her mother's line of work. We then see her sick mother lying in bed back in their house, so I guess the townspeople were okay with them moving back in? Although that wouldn't make any sense because they just told Emilia and Father Benedicto that they weren't welcome. Maybe the rent in the cave was just getting a little too expensive. On her deathbed, Clarita's mother apologizes for not being able to give her a good life. There are a lot of tears being shed by the characters in this film, though not as much as me before going to sleep every night. Her mother passes away, and this is the moment Clarita loses faith in God. Now that her mother is dead and Clarita has lost her faith, she opens herself up to torment from the demons. The furniture in her house moves on its own and she retreats. In the darkness behind her, we see the terrifying face of a demon with a sinister smile. A black shadow appears, and this is the exact moment that Clarita becomes possessed. The flashback scenes showing Clarita's backstory are the most engaging and have the best scares. I loved seeing the demon's face barely poking out of the dark. I feel that the movie is actually scary when it's not trying to be your typical demonic possession film. Unfortunately, it goes right back to doing that. Father Salvador tries to make her feel better but isn't doing a really good job. Father Salvador looks at himself in the mirror and we see that a demon has attached itself to his back. This is what has been causing him pain throughout the film. It's a reveal that you can't not think of shudder when you see it, but it's still pretty creepy. Father Benedicto notices that Salvador is tired and in pain and suggests he take a break. Father Salvador gets in his face and yells at him, giving off the same energy as Bilbo when Gandalf told him to leave the ring. Just like the Archbishop suspected, the demon's influence is affecting Father Salvador and making him act this way. Either that or he's just a dick. They return to the jail cell and the demons have fully regained control of Clarita. She knocks everyone out and stops Father Salvador from wasting any more holy water. She does the whole demonic crawl backwards trope, which is overly done but still creepy. She taunts him until Father Benedicto places his rosary on her heart, which burns her. I guess that was enough to subdue her and get her back in bed, but I can't tell you for sure because it automatically cuts to Father Salvador crying in church. Father Salvador believed that he himself had dominion over the demons and that he was not an instrument of God. He asks God for forgiveness and to give him strength one last time. The two priests finally have a decent conversation without Salvador yelling at Benedicto. He talks about how arrogant he was during his first exorcism and that the child didn't make it. Despite having helped numerous people as a priest, he still feels guilty for the child's demise. This is most likely his last exorcism and he is entering his redemption arc. They begin the exorcism and Father Salvador is going all in on the holy water budget. I'm actually surprised he's not dual wielding it at this point. The demon targets Emilia and turns into her sister. In a flashback, we see that her sister was essayed by Japanese soldiers and she screamed at Emilia to run away. Emilia falls for the trickery and lunges at Clarita before all the lights go out. The warden turns on his flashlight and Clarita is missing from the chair. We then get a weak jump scare before Clarita climbs backwards up the wall behind them. She lunges at the warden in one of the most predictable jump scares I've ever seen and bites off his finger. Clarita then turns into Father Benedicto's mother and we finally learn how he got that scar. During his mother's exorcism, she pled with him to free her from her restraints. He used a razor to cut the ropes, which she then used to cut his cheek, and then removed herself from the realm of the living. With everyone else taken out of the fight, Father Salvador commands the demon to reveal its name. He gets shoved to the ground and Father Benedicto continues to demand the demon's identity. Clarita is revealed to be possessed by several demons: Baal, Adramelech, Apollyon, My Dad, Cain, Lilith, and Lucifer. The two priests then successfully drive out the demons from Clarita's body while Emilia watches in the corner offering emotional support. The film's climax and exorcism of Clarita was fine, I guess. The buildup felt pretty intense, but I think that the entire thing falls apart towards the end. It felt extremely rushed and way too easy to defeat the sinister 6 demons that were possessing Clarita. Just like Season 2, Episode 8 of House of the Dragon, they had to wrap it up, leaving me feeling pretty unsatisfied. I never felt like the characters were in any danger and the stakes felt extremely low, resulting in a not scary, disappointing scene. The demons left Clarita though, so mission accomplished. Emilia goes to visit her sister, and I don't really feel like her story had any payoff either. I actually think that her story was the least interesting, and the film would have been the same, if not better, without her. Father Salvador finally retires and tells Father Benedicto to learn from his mistakes. Benedicto's final words are that it is folly to believe in God and not the devil. After all these years of being possessed and tormented by demons, Clarita is finally free and sporting a new look. She has regained her faith in God, and in the film's final scene, enters a church and prays with a hopeful smile on her face as the movie ends. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was Clarita. My friends, let me get straight to the point. This film was very messy and overall just not scary. This is my first time watching this film, and yet I feel like I've seen it 100 times before. This is your typical run-of-the-mill demonic possession exorcism movie, nothing more, nothing less. The only 2 characters I really cared about were Father Benedicto and of course Clarita herself. Father Salvador and Emilia were there because, well, I actually can't think of a good reason why. Their characters weren't bad, just really unnecessary and only took away from the much more interesting characters. Some may argue that Father Salvador was passing Father Benedicto the torch or showing him the ropes, but all I saw was him getting yelled at the entire film and getting told, "Learn from my mistakes." With the film being titled and based on the real Clarita Villanueva, a lot was riding on the performance of Jodie Santa Maria, and she gets the job done. Her storyline was very interesting and had the most effective scares, as few as there were. The scares are just way too few and far between, and most of them are the predictable cliche scares we've seen time and time again, earning Clarita a less than desirable scare score of 35%. Just watching the trailer to this movie told me everything I needed to know before going in. However, I always try to give movies a chance with the hope that I'll be pleasantly surprised. Unfortunately, this just wasn't the case. The scariest scene in the film is when Clarita encounters the demon right after her mother's death, specifically because of this one shot of the demon lurking in the dark behind her. It's an absolutely terrifying shot, and the demon's evil smirk is really menacing. If we had a lot more scenes of Clarita being tormented by the demons prior to being arrested, the film could have been a lot scarier. But as always, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Thank you all for tuning in, and I cannot wait to see y'all right back here in the horror mine. Y'all stick around.